We have done that. I've done that with Milei. The two of us, we have done that. Even before Milei became president. I think this year my brother will become president in Chile.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 297, and returning is Axel Kaiser, the great Chilean libertarian who's known me. How long have you known Javier Milei?
For 8 years. We became close because we were fighting socialism together in Latin America. And well, I was all over and he was in Argentina. And he started, it's funny enough, he started following me. And so he wasn't very famous at the time. And so I signed a book for him that I have written, and that was influential on his way of thinking. And that's how we became friends.
It's so amazing, yeah. But we're going to talk about Milei. But we're also going to talk about, Mario Vargas Llosa, who died on the 13th, which is appropriately enough Thomas Jefferson's birthday. And we're going to talk about him because he was another great Spanish liberal, or Spanish-speaking liberal, from Peru. Won the Nobel for Literature in 2010, and certainly influenced a lot of people, and was certainly, I don't know if he's a friend of Milei, but certainly a supporter. So, I think we'll do that first. How are you? You having a good day today, Axel? You're back in Argentina? Yeah.
I'm back in Argentina. It's very hot here. I'm in Tucumán, that's the north, and this place is always hot. So I am kind of sweating while I'm doing this interview.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's not quite as I might have lost you there for a minute, but who knows? There's not quite as much AC down there as there is up here. Anyway, so we'll talk about Mario Vargas Llosa and literature. Did you knew him too, correct?
Yes, Mario? we were friends. Not very close friends, but we met many times. We even spent days together in southern Chile with other people, of course. We had a very polemic exchange in 2018, where I asked Mario if he thought that there were, dictatorships that were less evil than others, and he reacted saying that all were equally evil. And of course, I don't agree with that. I think it is clearly the case that some dictatorships are much worse than others. But that was a polemic in Chile, in my country, and all over Latin America. And I keep saying, there is no way to compare Hitler with the dictatorship of, Mikhail Gorbachev in the Soviet Union. It's like absurd. But so other than that, he was a very caring person, I would say, very friendly, very open. I have a very nice, writing of him that he dedicated to me from his book, La llamada de la tribu, the call of the tribe, where he was very, friendly and affectionate. So I have very good memories with him, or of him, and he was very, of course, influential in the Spanish-speaking world because he was the Nobel laureate writer, and he wasn't left. Unlike Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who was a communist and who was this is a Colombian writer who won the Nobel Prize, but he was in favor of Castro. And Mario was originally a communist as well. He was a castrista, but he changed his mind when he, realized what socialism was all about, and then he became a very, very hardcore critic of communism and leftist regimes in Latin America, leftist dictatorships, let's say. He was not classical liberal intellectual. That was not his area. He was not someone who would write a lot about freedom in the sense of theories and speaking about these things. He was a writer. That's why he was so famous. And I think there were inconsistencies in his thinking. Some of them very obvious. And he was very much driven by certain moral principles that he would not compromise. But at the same time, you can probably, if you are uncompromising, I mean, if you don't compromise your moral principles in the rhetoric, I mean, in theory, your moral principles end up being undermined. The example is, I'm against war, for instance, because people die. Okay, you're against war, that's your principle because people die. But sometimes war is inevitable. So you have to kill other people, so less people, in the end, less people die, or fewer people die from your side. So I think he had kind of this view, this worldview that was a little bit simplistic, unless in what regarded these topics, dictatorships and things like that. But other than that, I think he was a major force for good in the region in general, and he had many friends. We all liked him, and I mean, I think he was a good person, and a great, let's say, writer, novelist, a man of letters.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, a man of letters. How would he compare to some other, I guess I'd call liberal, in the true sense of the word, liberal novelists, like, say, Ayn Rand or Heinlein or some of these other people who really wrote about freedom, or maybe even some of the older writers?
Well, I think Ayn Rand all of her books are about freedom, and he had a much more radical position than Mario. I think Mario was not really a libertarian or even a classical liberal. He was more of a social democrat, a very moderate social democrat. Of course, he liked the market and he liked, democracy and all of that. In that sense, and he was in favor of free speech and not in favor of the woke nonsense that we have seen everywhere. He actually wrote against that, but he was not like someone who would try to bring the state to a minimum like Ayn Rand would, to the minimum expression. He wouldn't be as radical as for Mises, for instance, or as Hayek, or let alone Robert Nozick. That was not his philosophy. So Ayn Rand, she created a whole movement in favor of free market and individual liberty. Mario didn't do that. It was not his area. We have done that. I've done that with Milei. The two of us, we have done that. Even before Milei became president. I think this year my brother will become president in Chile, running on these ideas on the platform that myself and others have created, and that he's very eloquently and very, I would say, in a very smart way, he's putting it forward and offering it to the people. So that we have created, we have transformed to some extent the landscape, the political landscape, and the intellectual landscape in Latin America. In that sense, and Ayn Rand did the same in the U.S. She developed her own philosophy. We basically have rescued the ideals of classical liberalism, and we have made it popular for the masses. So it's different.
Yeah, because Milei was the lead singer of a Rolling Stone cover band. I now call it rock star liberalism.
It's the rock star. Yeah, that's really important what you're saying. It's the rock star liberalism. It's what happened with Milei. It's what happens with me and others who we go and we have thousands of people listening to our talks, and we have millions of views on YouTube and things like that. Of course, Milei is Mick Jagger is the leading rock star, but we are not doing very badly either. I mean, we are really having a huge impact. It's a few people, but we are having an impact.
It's really great to see it having an impact. I mean, and just to, because South America really needs this. I mean, as a, and Ayn Rand did inspire some other novelists. As a Mario, did he inspire some novelists too? So,
come again? Sorry.
Did Mario inspire other novelists or other creatives too? Or?
Well, I'm sure he did inspire some people, but I don't think we have great in the present time we have great writers like Mario in Latin America. So he might have inspired a few. Maybe Jorge Edwards, who is Chilean. He's a very, very good writer, but he was almost the same generation as Mario. I don't know if they have influenced them among themselves. So he's an older guy, but younger writers, I'm not aware. Maybe it's because I'm not aware, but that we have very great writers inspired in the works of Mario. And the other thing is that most writers are leftists. So Mario was an exception. He was a leftist, but he stopped being a leftist, and then he became more like a social democrat, center. I would even say center right, a centrist, let's say, not even right, but a centrist, a pure centrist, made with center right leanings. But we don't have anything like that among people. Writers or scholars. I would have to think about it, but I don't. No one comes to mind. So maybe many people follow Mario, but they are not good enough, and so they are not so well known.
Well, being a novelist is certainly a field where most of the people don't ever make a living.
Yeah.
There are a lot more writers than and your brother's Johannes, so he's in the Chamber of Deputies in Chile, and he's going to run for president. You said that's wild.
He's running for president. I think he's going to win. He was living in Austria until 3 years ago. Then he came to Chile. He campaigned. He was elected. He not even him. He didn't expect it. Let's say. And he won, and he has done a fantastic job as a congressman. Of course, the name was known because I'm very well known in Chile as well.
Yeah.
I was the better known of the two now. I think it's more or less as even, or maybe he's even more because he's running for president. So everyone tends to know you when you're running for president. So, but the movement, he created a political party, the National Libertarian Party. And this movement, all the people who follow it are followers of mine and are followers of the think tank that I created 12 years ago with some businessmen in Chile. It's called Fundación for Progress. Yeah. And we gave ourselves the goal to transform Chile, to restore the liberties that had been lost over the previous decades at the hands of socialists and all the center right people who had caved to socialism. And so many people wanted me to run for president. Even I had this conversation with my brother at some point, and I said, you have to run. You are a politician. You are going to do it better than I can. So I think he's going to make it. I think he's going to win. And then we will have another libertarian president, this time in Chile. So I'm very happy that the cultural revolution that we started 10, 12 years ago led to Milei in power, and now possibly to my brother in power. And even if he's not winning, someone from the center right will win. And we have moved the Overton window already to the right policies and the right ideas. So it's triumph. It's a triumph, anyways.
Oh, it is a triumph, and and it certainly it gives it a little more legitimacy when it is elected as opposed to Pinochet. I mean,
of course. No, the Pinochet case is particular one because people don't know this, but August 22nd, 1973, the Deputies Chamber in Chile issued a resolution approved that passed with 2/3 of the votes of the members, saying that the Allende regime, which was the the regime back then was unconstitutional and was, totalitarian dictatorship, attempting to impose a totalitarian dictatorship. So the Congress called the military to put an end to the agenda dictatorship, the communist dictatorship, that he was backed by the Soviet Union and Cuba, by the way. And I'm very happy that our military did that. Otherwise, we would have ended up like Cuba or Venezuela. I mean, the propaganda against the military regime afterwards was massive, because Chile was the first country in the world to democratically elect a Marxist president. And this was really a big issue in the Cold War, where communists had only, achieved power through revolution and violent means. So Henry Kissinger said this was one of the gravest things that had happened in the Western Hemisphere in a long time. And Pinochet, who was actually a friend of Allende, not close friend, but he had been appointed commander-in-chief by Allende, he didn't want to go for the coup. It was the Navy that forced his hand. And in the end, he went for the coup, and then he acted like it was all his idea. But we all know that this is not true, And yes, crimes were committed. I think that's where they lost the moral high ground. Not because they killed some terrorists and fighters on the streets, because you had these illegal parallel militia groups, terrorists fighting and shooting soldiers and shooting civilians and killing them. And of course, if you are fighting them and they shoot you, you shoot back, you kill them. It's fair. But the other things that they did, which was taking people prisoner and then making them disappear and things like that, this was horrible. And they should have never done that. This is, even if it really weren't a lot of people, but it's like 900 or so missing, 800 something. They could have taken like hundreds of thousands if they wanted to, or dozens of thousands. But they thought these were the enemy and so on. But this was something that they should have never done. This was horrible.
Yeah. Guess we drifted away from talking about Mario. I guess Mario was also influenced.
Mario is someone who never really understood the Chilean process. For instance, he thought that Allende was a Democrat. That is not true. Allende was elected democratically, but with the 36% of the votes, he was appointed by Parliament as the president, because at the time you had to choose between the two first majorities if no one got over 50% of the vote. So I ended up like 36 point something, and Alessandri, the guy who came in second place, had like 34 point something. So very close. And Parliament decided to put Allende in charge. And so, but then from day one, they started with the attempt to create a totalitarian Marxist dictatorship. Fidel Castro spent almost 1 month in Chile after Allende was elected, visiting Allende and, going all over the country with him. So I think our armed forces saved us from something that would have been much worse. By the way, the armed forces not only restored economic freedom, and Chile became the most successful nation in the whole of Latin America, thanks to the Chicago boys, people who worked under the administration, but also restore democracy. So in 1980, the constitution that Pinochet created established a return of democracy for 1988. And when we had the referendum, it was not about democracy coming back or not. It was about, in 1988, we had this very famous yes-no referendum. It was about democracy coming back with Pinochet as president, or democracy coming back not with Pinochet as president. And the no won, and that's why Pinochet stepped down, and we had the transition to democracy. So it was never the intention of the Chilean military to take over power, never. It was like an emergency situation. They had to do what it was best for the country, and it's like power fell upon their shoulders. No one else could do anything about it. And 70% of Chileans were in favor of the coup. And this is what happened. And that's why they could keep power away in the end with no major problems. Why? Because they didn't have, the Chilean military was always institutional and Republican. It was a Prussian style military. and very Republican. They didn't have an ideology. They lack an ideology of power. The problem with the communists and the leftists is that they have an ideology of power. That's why when you see a communist coming to power, especially if it's a military dictatorship, they never go away. Never. And they steal elections and they do this and that if they do elections. So that's a massive difference. And that's why the Chileans are so proud of their armed forces. Today, you had the institutions in Chile with the highest public support are the armed forces and the police. Almost 80% public support. Politicians have like 2% or something, 3%. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's that way in a lot of countries. Although Chile hasn't had any major wars lately. I was just going to say that I think Mario was also influenced by Karl Popper, and he was certainly talked about the open society and its enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Mario was influenced by Popper and by Hayek and by Friedman and by Isaiah Berlin and others. There's no question about it. The thing is, I don't believe that he was he was not a libertarian, that's for sure, and he was not a Hayekian classical liberal either. That's why I'm saying he was a centrist, a very centrist guy who would, rescue things from different thinkers, but he would not be as committed to liberty, to the idea of a minimum state or a very small government as Friedman was, or as Hayek was, for instance, or Mises. I don't think that's his view. He wasn't far from that, but he was not, in that sense, very, very active in wanting a very, very small government.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Yeah. I'm glad. I didn't know your brother was running for president until you mentioned, but that's amazing. Yeah. I mean, hopefully we can have two countries, and I said maybe Milei is the equivalent of the Bolshevik Revolution for capitalism. You get something started. I mean,
I hope so. I think I have made that case for over a year since Milei came to office, that what was happening in Argentina, first of all, I don't want to brag, but I was one of the few who predicted Milei was going to win the presidency, because I took part in the Cultural Revolution that to some extent created Milei, but at the same time he created the revolution because he made it much more massive than it was. So I knew that the change was very deep. It had especially affected the youth in Argentina, and members of all social classes. This is amazing. So I said he's going to win. Not only that, because after he won, people were saying, no, he's not going to be able to govern. And I told all of them, you are not understanding what's going on. You have no idea. Why? Because you are a political scientist or someone who is used to reading, statistics about, polls or from polls, whatever, and you don't understand the underlying forces that are making this change possible. The only comparable situation to what Milei is doing in Argentina now is Perón for the other side of the ideological spectrum in the 40s. It might be the case that Argentina becomes as committed to freedom and markets from now on as it was to statism and Keynesianism and socialism in the previous decades or the previous century. And that's why I predicted that he was going to be able to govern, and also that people were going to take the pain. Analysts were not understanding. They were saying, no, when the pain starts, hitting people, then the polls are going to collapse. No, they are not going to collapse, because people are true believers in what Milei is doing, and they're going to see results, and you are seeing the results. That's why he has managed the impossible. I don't know if you're aware that they lifted the capital controls a few days ago.
They did, yes.
And like always, people were saying, the critics were saying, oh, they're going to have massive devaluation and so on. Nothing happened. the peso even became stronger against the dollar. So yes, they have an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. This is, of course, they needed it. The country was completely destroyed when Milei came to power. But they have stable money supply in pesos, so it's not growing anymore, and you don't have fiscal deficit. So it's not going to be the case that the dollar is going to shoot to go through the roof. So yeah, I mean, this is interesting because it's what people don't understand is that ideas move societies. It's the ideas. If you want to have a political revolution, you need to have a cultural revolution first. That is what Gramsci said, and he was right. Gramsci was the founder of the Communist Party in Italy, one of the most literal Marxist thinkers in the 20th century. And Hayek said the same thing. The politicians follow the ideas that are, in fashion, and so you have to change the ideas, climate of opinion, and then Friedman, by the way, used to stress this point, and then politicians will follow and will change things. And this is what's going on in Argentina, and it's going to happen, I think, in Chile. And why? Because also the other ideas are not working; they are a mess. So, yeah.
And if your brother does get elected president, he's not going to have nearly the mess that Milei has to clean up.
No, the problem that we have in Chile is not so much economics, although we are a country that has grown 0.6 per capita over the last decade. So the Chilean miracle is over. They destroyed it with socialism and redistributionism and egalitarianism. So we have economic problems for sure, but not the mess that we have in Argentina. We have a security problem. Chile has become very unsafe. So all the Tren de Aragua members and the Venezuelans and the people that Marco Rubio and Trump are deporting, well, lots of these type of people came into Chile because we have had an open border policy over the last 10 years, basically. So we had an influx of over 1 million migrants in a country of 18 million people. That's a huge percentage of the population. So so many of them are members of these terrorist organizations and narco cartels. And Santiago has become very unsafe. And Chile has become very unsafe. Major cities. So we are seeing things that did not exist before in Chile, like kidnappings, beheaded people lying on the streets, murders, like we are in the far west, and so on and so forth. And we were not used to this. Heavily armed people, heavily armed criminals with military equipment that didn't exist before. And so this is getting out of hand. And so, and this is the challenge that my brother faces, also because you have left-wing political parties that are very much aligned with the narco cartels and with the dictatorship. And also you have in the judiciary, you have judges that are left-wing activists, and they work for the criminals and the leftist mob and the leftist terrorist organizations. So it's not going to be easy. You have to do something in a country that destroyed the capacity of their police and their armed forces to react to these threats. Also because they're very scared that if they do anything, they will end up in jail. I mean, any police officer does something and they use their weapon to defend themselves, they end up in jail because the prosecutors are all leftists and the judges are mostly leftists. So there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot expect them to do anything if they are going to pay the cost. They have families, they have to provide for them, and so we are facing a huge crisis. And this is the big problem that my brother will face, or the next president will face. So yeah, it's different than in Argentina, but it's not less of a challenge.
And neither country really has any culture of self-defense, do they? I mean, most people don't own guns because, of course, if they did use guns to defend their home, they might get arrested anyway.
Well, the thing is that the politicians in Chile, also the center-right, which in my opinion are more leftist than anything else, they have done everything in their power to make it impossible for honest citizens to have weapons to defend themselves, to protect themselves and their families. They have done everything to make it easier for criminals to break into houses and to do whatever they want. This would change also with my brother. In Argentina, it's not as strict. In Argentina, you have more freedom in that sense, and the Milei government is, of course, in favor of decent people defending themselves, but not in Chile. So, of course, this is a huge problem. You cannot even hire people, professionals, that carry guns in order to protect you or protect your restaurant or your store, like you can do almost everywhere in Latin America, in any country that faces these problems. Not in Chile. Only banks and certain institutions can have armed guards. That's it.
From what I hear, a lot of people get around this by having big dogs.
Yeah, but the problem with the big dogs is that, you can shoot them, or people have their dogs. It's better than nothing. But other than that, we are sitting ducks for all the criminals. Can do anything.
Yeah, you were somewhat. What do you think? What do you think led to Milei's success? Because you've known him over these 8 years. I mean, he certainly became more popular. It was just one talk show appearance at a time. But you were somewhat a part of that. So and what do you think you might do? Yeah.
He appeared on many talk shows over the years, and he was predicting. He's a very good economist, so he was predicting what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it came exactly as he had predicted. So that started, he started to gain a lot of credibility. People were laughing at him, were saying he had no clue, whatever, that he was like eccentric and funny, but his predictions were nonsense. But then everything came to happen the way he had predicted, and then he became a deputy for Buenos Aires. He created a political party, and now he's the president. I mean, it's really, if you really think about it, what Milei achieved, Milei and his people, it's extraordinary.
Oh yes.
It's a one in a century story. It's you will not find something similar in any other place this century in Latin America, or maybe in the Western world for that matter. I mean, it's really unbelievable what they have achieved. That people don't realize it, and no one trusted. I mean, no one believed in the process. Almost no one thought that Milei was going to make it. I mean, I spoke to so many people everywhere, not only Latin America, but US, Europe. He's crazy. He was attacked by centuries, by right-wing people, by leftists, by everyone. And nevertheless, now they have to keep their mouth shut, because you see inflation coming down from 25 to 2%. You see fiscal surplus, which is something that Argentina didn't have in a consistent way in, I don't know, maybe a century. Economy is growing. Unemployment is going down. Poverty fell like 20 points, 18, 20 points. So you cannot deny his success. People, and instead of recognizing that they were wrong, they are just pretending that this is not happening. They don't even talk about it. They prefer not to talk about it, because if they talk about it, they have to admit they were wrong. And all their economic models and all their ideas of how to run a country and everything were wrong. They have no clue. And they still have no clue how to make a nation prosper. They have no idea. All these people have been kids of good times. They have never fixed any problem. They have created problems, the leftists especially. But on the center right and all the other guys, they have never fixed anything in their lives. Not an economy, not a country, anything. So they don't know how it works. But they are very good at criticizing from their cocktails at the golf club.
And the important thing about Milei is, a lot of economists are great, but they really don't know how to go out and talk to the taxi drivers and the plumbers and the construction workers and the people working in restaurants. But Milei knows how to talk to those people.
Yeah, he does, and because he comes from the middle lower class, I would even argue. He's not an upper class guy. He had a rough infancy. His father was a bus driver, I think. And so he feels the way that regular people feel. And that's something that you can, it's like a vibration, a vibe. People connect with that. And all the other politicians, candidates, and all the other people, no, they are from the elite. They don't have the experience. They don't know what it is to live from paycheck to paycheck. They have no idea. And so that's why he was so angry, and people were angry. And they shared this anger with Milei, and they saw him, and he was also a very good communicator, so he could explain these things in a way that people understand. And social media was crucial, like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. This was so important for Milei's success. I mean, without that, I don't think he would have made it. It was really, really important because it viralized the content, especially among the youth. So yeah, I mean, it's an amazing story, and we are going to start seeing the best part, I hope, in the next 2 or 3 years.
I hope so as well. How do you think the elections will go for him in the fall? Do you think? I mean, all the senators and deputies that are there right now aren't up for re-election, but he could, get some more seats, I hope. And also a lot of the provincial governors are still very hostile toward Milei.
I think, the only political party that really exists in Argentina outside from the Kirchneristas is the Libertad Avanza, Milei's party. The other parties have disappeared, more or less. I mean, are marginal. They are not really relevant. And I think they're going to be successful because of the economy. Because he has delivered. He has done exactly what he said he was going to do. And the results are exactly those that he predicted and he promised. So how can you not support a president who does that? Right? You were in a huge or in a very deep hole, and the guy is digging you out. And so I think he's going to have very good results unless something happens from here, between here and the end of October when we have the elections. But I don't think so. I think he's going to be extremely successful, and the audacity to get rid of the capital controls now in an election year, where you run the risk of having a spike in inflation, which is exactly the reason why he was elected, to control inflation. I think that will end up being favorable to him because people will see that he delivered, that he was, and that he did not wait for political reasons, for what was convenient for him, more convenient for him, maybe. He had the courage to do it. Now Argentinians can buy and sell dollars. We have a floating exchange rate. And so individuals can travel, and they can pay with the dollars with no problem. They're gonna get a market price, not an official, price. So it's another thing that I think will help him a lot to have eliminated these capital controls. Will be very important.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I know he passed that law saying, you could conduct your business in anything you want, you could do it. And of course, Argentina was already somewhat dollarized. I mean, when both times I went down there, I went to my credit union and I asked them for $51 bills, and I would use them for tips.
Yeah. Argentina is like bi-monetary economy. The dollar is really the currency that is used for saving and for paying lots of things. Real estate, you cannot buy in pesos, you buy in dollars. And that's the intention of the Milei administration, is to have a free currency competition. so that you can use whatever you want. And of course, going to be the dollar. They have over $200 billion in cash in Argentina. 200 billion. It's the second country with most dollars in the world, after the United States. Someone once told me that Argentina had even more cash than the United States. But they have it under the mattress, of course, because it's money that has not been declared. Everything is so overregulated and overtaxed and so on, that people do everything on the side in the real market. They call it the black market, but it's not. It's the real market. You don't go with your $100,000 or your $2 million to the bank because you know they're going to steal it. You know the government can say any day, let's do a corralito, and that's game over. You lost your money. So people keep their money in their houses. And cash. You don't invest it. Not like you invest it having some returns, because where are you going to invest it? And if you invest it, you have to declare it, because it's not taxed money. You cannot do it. So, but it's better. That's the way Argentina, by the way, that's the reason why Argentina has not collapsed completely. It's because the market is working and finding solutions for people, that are outside of the law, because the law is stupid and totalitarian. So you have to find another way. But thanks God, Milei and Sturzenegger are solving all these problems. And I think at some point they will make huge tax reform that will make it more attractive for people in Argentina to be very rich, and for wealthy people from everywhere to come here.
Yeah, that's what happens when you're high taxes. You end up with this informal economy. So you end up with people putting their money under the mattress or something like that, which certainly is something that will attract crime.
Yeah, but it has been the way things go in Argentina for so long. It's everyone knows it for a century maybe, because you had capital controls, price fixing, inflation, hyperinflation, this and that. So everyone who can save buys dollars. You go to the cuevas and you buy the dollars at the they call it the blue rate, which is the market rate.
Yeah, the blue dollars. Yeah. Why do they call them blue dollars? Where did that come from?
Really, I don't know, but it's a clever thing because black market sounds like something evil, but blue sounds like something good. So I guess it's just legitimized the transactions that happen spontaneously in the market, as opposed to the transactions that are controlled and determined by the government. So it's a good question, actually. Why is it blue market? I don't know.
Or azul, dólares azul, yes.
And they called it in English. They called it the blue.
Oh, okay.
They say el mercado blue, so it's the blue market. It's like they don't call it azul, they call it blue. So it's interesting. But now it's not going to be necessary anymore, because you can have access to dollars.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's certainly some other things. Do you have anything to say about Mondino leaving? Diana Mondino leaving is the...
Yeah, I know her. I mean, she's a great lady. I think she made a mistake.
Yeah.
Because the foreign policy of a country is, determined by the president. And when I think she voted against the Cuban embargo or something like that.
She voted something that basically condemns she voted as a resolution to condemn the Cuban embargo.
Condemn the Cuban embargo, something like that was, yes.
I can't. That's something that's not really popular with American libertarians, because the embargo has been there 60 years. It's not really changed much there, but
No, it doesn't make any difference, because Cuba can have commerce with all other countries in the world, anyways. And but still, I mean, it's, as a president, as a country, you need to have your interests aligned, and your main partner is the United States. And there is no other country that Argentina relies more on than the United States. So you are not going to You cannot do that. I mean, I'm really shocked that Mondino did that. I don't understand why. It was obvious that she was going to lose her position as foreign policy minister.
And of course, Castro was funding a lot of these revolutionary movements down there too, right? I mean, he was funding the.
In the past, yes. Now they don't have the money. Then Chavez came in. Chavez had a lot of money because oil prices were so high. He squandered like almost $1 trillion, Chavez, and in oil wealth, and a lot of that went to Cuba, because Cuba depended on the Soviet Union, and then from Venezuela they depended on until recently at least, from Venezuela. I don't know. I don't think Venezuela is giving them a lot, but something they are giving the Cubans. Now Mexico stepping in. Claudia Sheinbaum, who is also she's a communist, basically. She's very much in favor of all the dictatorships, left-wing dictatorships in Latin America. And so she's sending oil to Cuba and supporting their criminal friends, their dictators there. So yeah, I mean, but now they don't have the money. It's one way they found themselves is with cocaine and drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and from there they get a lot of money, but it's not as much as they got from oil. They destroyed the production capacity of Venezuela. I mean, Venezuela was producing almost, I think it was like 5 million barrels per day when Chavez came to power, and now it's like 600,000. So they really destroyed it.
Yeah,
that's 600, 700,000, something like that. So it's catastrophic. That's socialism.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of Venezuelans have immigrated to Argentina, and I see they all go out and scream for Milei. They love Milei, and he loves them.
Yeah, of course, because Venezuelans, most of them have learned that socialism is misery, and the leftist parties and politicians in the other Latin American countries, they have historically been allies and friends of Maduro, Chavez, and Castro. So the Kirchners, Boric, the current president in Chile, the Communist Party in Chile, Lula in Brazil, Petro in Colombia, Correa in Ecuador, all of them, they belong to the same gang. So it's a bunch of criminals. Some of them have the chance of imposing dictatorships. The others don't. But if they did have the chance, they would do it. So they play the democratic game for as long as they have to, until they can close the system and have their dictatorship running.
Yeah, they play the democratic game until they get in, and then they don't have to play it anymore.
The Nazis invented that. They were the first ones to do it.
Yes, they were.
All these people here are basically heirs of Nazis, of Hitler and his boys. They were the first ones to say, let's use democracy to come to power, and once we are there, we are going to destroy it, because the other way is more difficult. But that's what Chavez did. That's what Allende wanted to do. That's what Correa attempted to do. That's what all of these people do.
Well, yeah, and they also had, and the Nazi Party was kind of its own government by itself. So they instead of the police, there was a Gestapo. I think that
they created a state police. The Gestapo was created by, I think it was Goering who created the Gestapo, and but they had, before that, they had the SAs, Sturmabteilung. That was
brown shirts,
Rome, and then I think that Goering took over that, and then they created the SS. That was Himmler. They created the SS. And so once they were in power, but before that they had this stormer troops, SA, and Röhm was killed then in a conspiracy orchestrated by Göring and I think it was Goebbels. um, and he was killed.
Yeah,
but he was a thug. I mean,
yeah. I often ask: is it fair to say that the college professors in South America are worse than the U.S.? Because that seems to be where all this stuff initially comes from.
it comes from universities, no doubt about this. The problem I have with the college professors in the United States is that I never thought I was going to see something like this in my life. Probably they are even worse than the college professors at the universities here in Latin America, because no one takes the college professors at universities in Latin America as seriously as you take your college professors in the United States. Like a Harvard professor says this, then the Princeton guy said the other thing, and so on. But basically, what you have in the Ivy Leagues and other universities in the United States is it's a cult. It's a cult of people who are brainwashing younger generations, indoctrinating them with ideas whose aim is the destruction of Western civilization. That's basically it. So the whole woke movement started at universities, and it's nothing else than neo-Marxism that first started in the humanities and social sciences, and then it took over to other departments, and the Democratic Party, of course, where you have the woke having their political house, basically, and no one is doing a lot in order to stop them. So I think that's what people rejected when they elected Trump also. If you see the polls, the support, public support for universities in the United States has collapsed over the last years.
They've lost a lot of prestige. And the other scary thing, too, is that, a lot of these people are now corporate executives are becoming this. And you even have a case where people who made billions in the free market are now coming out against it, which makes no sense to me at all. But then again, Soros did the same thing. So,
well, you've always had rich people that supports the destruction of Western civilization and freedom. It's not the majority, but you always had them. Sociopaths or people who are intoxicated with ideology. Remember that the Frankfurt School in Germany in the 1920s, 1923, if I remember correctly, was started by a businessman, Felix Weil, who was Argentinian German guy who had a lot of money, and he created the Institut für Sozialwissenschaft in Frankfurt, which is the Frankfurt School. And it was basically the aim of this institution was to make Germany a communist state, a satellite of the Soviet Union. And how would they attempt that? Would achieve that? Well, they would take a lot of intellectuals like Horkheimer, Adorno, Marcuse, Pollock, and others, and they would criticize the German culture and Western culture, really, Western culture and Western institutions and everything, until they destroyed every single principle and every single threat of our societies. And this is one of the most influential intellectual movements in all time. Most of them were Jews. They left to the U.S. They went to Columbia University when the Nazis came to power in Germany, and they continued doing their work there. So they were tremendously influential among the intellectuals in the United States, but then their ideas took over the whole humanities of the humanities and the French postmoderns, of course, who were very close in many respects. So yeah, I mean, it's why would someone want to have a communist system in Germany, or a rich guy? It's like you have these cases of very, very rich people, educated people, who want to play God and recreate the whole social order from scratch, because that's in the end what it is. It's all about, let's create the thing that we want to create and ignore all the laws of nature and all the laws of economics and so on. So yeah, I mean, it's horrible. People need to realize that universities are the epicenter of everything that happens in our societies. This is really important, and that's one of the reasons why Nazism had a chance, because German universities before Hitler came to power had become completely overrun by statist and socialist professors. Ludwig von Mises wrote about this and explained what had happened to German universities in Austria and Germany, everywhere, especially in Germany, in the late 19th century, and onward. So,
you know German as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I studied in Germany. I did my PhD in Heidelberg in Germany.
You've probably read Mises in German.
I read some Mises in German, but since I have it in English, it's I read it in English. Actually, I have one book in German, Nationaleconomie, by Mises. It's the only one, which is, the equivalent of the human action.
Oh yeah, it's amazing what he accomplished. Well, you said you had about an hour. We're getting about an hour. It's been great having you here. Thank you so much for taking time for my little show.
Of course.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say before we go?
No, I wish you good luck, and
yeah,
people keep an eye on what's going on in Argentina, what's going to happen in Chile. Gonna be
I hope so too. I really, I often say Milei is really where else is there a reason to be up? Well, I guess maybe if your brother wins, that's another reason.
Yeah, but Milei is even more symbolic because Argentina was even more statist and destroyed.
Yeah.
So I think, and it's a country that has more gravitas in general. So more than Chile. So I think, and I hope that this continues to evolve in a positive way.
No, there's probably some similarities, but there are differences. I mean, and you share one of the longest borders in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I know there's actually some disputes over some of those islands down there, right? I think they'll ever does anybody care except for the penguins?
Yeah. There are some, but those are going to be resolved, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's been great having you on here, Axel. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, go buy my novel Escape from the Village, check out my Substack, and I'm also on Buy Me a Coffee. You can support the show there. Thank you, Axel Kaiser. I'm Chris Baker. We're out. Buy my novel Escape from the Village from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.